From Alachua, Florida, I'm Namamrita Kaylee.
I'm Krishna Kishore.
And I'm Namamrita. Welcome to Nectar Talks, from the heart of New Ramamrita, the largest Hare Krishna community in North America.
And the home of thousands of Bhakti Yoga practitioners. In our ongoing series of live interviews, we explore a range of spiritual topics, introducing you to inspirational community members and guest speakers with diverse backgrounds and experience.
Like bees searching for nectar, we seek to extract pearls of wisdom from how they live their lives and the spiritual lessons they can impart to us and our listeners.
If you're seeking nectar, look no further. All right.
Let's get started.
Everyone, welcome back to another installment of Nectar Talks. Today I have Saranagati, who is a resident of New Ramamrita. At least from what I understand, she grew up here and now she's back here. So we'll find out all about that. I believe she spent some time in the ashram here and eventually decided to become a model and spend a good amount of years outside of temple life and the community here. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all the adventures that Shara's had out there. I know that Shara loves gardening. I've attended some of the meetings that she's put together. And welcome back to Alachua, Shara. How are you?
Thank you. Well, it is really wonderful to be back in Alachua. Give maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would have said, no, I can't go back to Alachua. It's too small. I want to be in the cities. And yeah, that doesn't last very long. You could do it for about 10 years and then you're like, oh man, I miss all my devotee friends. Life was so simple there. You start actually wanting that simplicity back rather than all the craziness that you think you crave when you're younger.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, it's really nice to be back.
I totally get it. When you say that, I kind of imagine like a boomerang. You just left with all this power and energy to go experience the world. And it seems like you came back just as strong.
Yeah, you come roaring back in. Everyone's like, oh, you're back. And I'm like, yeah, what'd you expect? Everybody comes back to Alachua.
I know. Someone once told me, you'll be moving here one day. And I was like, what? And sure enough, here I am.
I've heard that from multiple people.
Yeah, it's funny.
I couldn't stay away. Yeah.
A true testament to the devotees that are here.
Yeah. And you come back and it's like, everything for the most part is where it left off. All your friendships. It's wonderful. I think that's something that maybe sometimes we take for granted, but we're very lucky that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to hearing about kind of the different phases you went through in your life since growing up here and eventually coming back. And especially, I'm also curious to hear about how your personal journey in Krishna consciousness evolved through all of that. So maybe we can start with a little bit about your upbringing and what it was like growing up here. And then we'll go into how you eventually got launched in your career and all that.
Sure. I was in Detroit until about the age of 10. I moved to Alachua when I was 10.
Okay.
And that was 95. I'm dating myself here, but that was 95. Mm-hmm. And but even in Detroit, I lived across the street from my best devotee friend, Gopal, who I'm sure a lot of you guys know, Gopal Trivedi. He lived right across the street. I went to Gurukul there. With a bunch of other younger kids. It was only like 11 of us, but all my memories of Detroit were amazing as well. We ran around the Fisher Mansion. That was like a wonderful, magical playground for us when we were little.
Yeah.
And then moved to Alachua right before the temple now was built. So I remember getting there and Guru Puja was still in the trailer that was on the temple property.
Right.
Yeah. And Jaya and Priya were my first friends. Nice. And yeah, and just, watching the community grow into what it's become has been, I mean, just amazing.
Yeah.
It really has. Yeah, I went to the day school with Mother Sukara. Mother Sukara was our teacher. And then I went from there to Lakshmani's ashram for 3 years. I had a wonderful time at Lakshmani's ashram. One of my favorite memories ever of my childhood is going to India with them.
Nice.
Yeah, it was just mind blowing. Like the adventure.
How long was that trip?
I want to say it was probably about 2 months.
Oh,
we were
wow.
gone. We were gone for a while. Yeah, we did a lot of. It wasn't just Mayapur and Vrindavan. Like we went to all these different holy places and all these different cities and Jagannath Puri, and we really did the works. And that was the first time I had been there, so it was mind blowing.
Yeah. I experienced my first time growing up in Krishna consciousness, but only knowing it from the West. And then it's like you're going to the motherland,
Right. This is where it happens. And you're like,
yeah, it's an amazing experience.
Yeah. And when you're a young devotee in Krishna consciousness, all this stuff that you hear, you're actually like, this, Vrindavan, this is where Krishna lived. Yeah. It's, you start putting, or these are the actual shoes of, some saintly person. And it's just awesome to be able to connect those.
How would you describe, we'll take a first picture of your inner journey at that time when you're, going to the ashram and you're going in India for the first time. How would you describe your experience, your view of Krishna consciousness and spirituality at that time?
Looking back, I'm like, from the realizations I've had till now, I'm like, wow, I don't think I realized how lucky I was then. This is something, well, all my friends are devotees, and we just don't, we follow these 4 regulated principles, and they're super easy, and all our friends follow them. So, just not full of but that's to be expected when you're younger.
Sure.
But it was just kind of it was a wonderful childhood, but I think I didn't really know why it was so wonderful until I got a little bit older. Yeah.
Okay. So eventually, and tell me if I'm jumping too far ahead, you ended up moving and starting a career as a model. Were there any other significant milestones prior to that, and how did that come about eventually?
I went to Santa Fe Community College, and I really loved it there. And then I went to University of Florida, and after I finished my 2 years at Santa Fe, and I was like, this is madness. The sizes of the classrooms, and I just wasn't used to that. Like all the Gurukula experience, and even Santa Fe was small classrooms with a lot of teacher-student relationships that made it fun and easy to learn. And at UF, I just didn't feel inspired at all. So I took
you study at the time at UF?
I was in there for English. I was an English major.
Okay.
I didn't know what I wanted to do with that, but I know that I really loved writing and reading and writing. Really loved writing fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I started feeling a little lost at UF. And so I took a break, and I was there. My mom still doesn't let me forget this, because I was there on a scholarship. So to this day, she's like, oh, that 7-year scholarship. And I'm like, I know, I'm so sorry, Mata.
Right. You know how many people would die for that?
Exactly. You get that little guilt trip, and yeah. Yeah, but I took some time off, and I went, and I was working actually at Krishna.com.
Okay.
So I was working there for a year, loved working there. I mean, we had Tamarpani Prabhu and his wife Loka Shakshini. I got to work with them, and Ija Prabhu. And I mean, that's the best, kind of job you can have, is working with devotees. And
Krishna.com. I used to come visit from Savannah where I lived, and that was just the spot to go to. I loved driving down that dirt road and going to that double wide and just checking out,
At the back
who's
of the
there
temple.
and what's hanging on the walls, what's for sale. Yeah, that was a great place to hang out, actually.
Yeah, it was. And you really could go in and just kind of talk to people. And, Nagaraj and Yamaraj Prabhu were in the other room working
they're
on
doing BTG over there. And
we'd always try to get Yamaraj Prabhu to start laughing. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I have such good memories there. And so transitioning out of Alachua.
So tell us a little bit about what was the springboard? Was it the college experience that just wasn't doing it for you, and you wanted to find a different career, way of life? What was it?
Yeah, I think I was one of those. I had it growing up. I was always like the tallest kid, tallest girl, even at a younger age, and how you get those people that are like, oh, your daughter's so beautiful, she should be a model. And it when you're younger, you're like, oh, wow, well, maybe I can do that. So I had that, some of that was going on. And then my roommate, Jivana Wilhoit, we lived together. She was my roommate, and we actually worked together at Krishna.com, and she took all the stock photos.
I was just saying, she's known for always having a camera in her hand.
Exactly.
She takes great photos.
She takes great photos. She's very artistic. Yeah. So we just made a trip to St. Augustine at one point with a bunch of our friends, and we snuck off at one point and did our own little photo shoot away from everybody else, just for fun. And I sent those pictures in later to a couple of agencies in Miami, and Ford Models was like, hey, we like your look, come down and see us. And so that was kind of the beginning of the end. So I went down with my mom. And
sorry, I was muted there.
Oh, I didn't think you weren't saying anything, were you?
No. Miami is a big recruiting ground for modeling, isn't it?
It is. I mean, most of those, New York, you can get, it's a little harder actually, but LA, Chicago, Miami, New York is like, they do it, but you usually go there when you're a little established already.
Right. By the way, I'm very interested with all our guests, when we get to learn about a particular career, I think it's a great place to dive into. So I'll be asking you questions about that.
Sure. Yeah, I know a lot of people are like, oh, what's it like? And
right. So you sent these photos to the agencies in Miami.
Yeah, and Ford Models said, come down. So my mom and I went down, and
how'd your mom feel about this?
My mom was all for it. She was like, oh, that's, I'm sure as a parent, there's a certain amount of pride there. when modeling agency recruits your kid, you're going to be like, well, yeah, that's kind of cool. My dad was a little skeptical, as I don't blame him. I'm the only child, by the way, no siblings, little girl. So he's, oh no, she's got to be safe. I don't want her to get exploited, and perfectly valid worries. Perfectly valid. Yeah. So I actually moved down there a week later. I talked to Tom Rapani, and he's like, you know what? Go for it. You got this opportunity. And he was so kind about it. I never forgot that, because, I was like kind of timid bringing it up. Like, hey, I have this opportunity.
Because he was your boss at Krishna.com?
He was my boss at Krishna.com, yeah. And I was like, oh no, I have to tell him that I kind of want to move away. But he was so nice about it. There's, really lovely people there. Yeah. So I moved down there a week later.
So you moved to Miami?
I moved to Miami. Yeah. I rented the agencies there. They had a couple of model apartments in which they charged stupid amounts of money for the models, which you hopefully paid back when you made jobs, got jobs. So yeah, it kind of started there, and I was acclimating.
What were the people that you met, you know, whether it's the agency or other models? What was the atmosphere like?
The agency was, yeah, the agents were really nice. I did get stuck with a kind of crazy model roommate. She had some pretty interesting issues. And just Miami Beach in itself is, looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I kind of didn't survive there, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. But it's kind of gross. Miami Beach is kind of gross.
Yeah.
Unless you go there with the right association. But I guess you could say that about anywhere, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So how long was your entire modeling career? Just to give us a little bit of a time frame from when you left and joined in Miami there for the first time. What, you know, are you still a model today? Do you still do?
I just got a residual check coming in from something I did years ago. If that counts. But no, I'm not actively modeling today.
So how long was that modeling career altogether?
Okay, I want to say maybe 15 years.
Okay, wow.
Something like that, yeah.
And is there a kind of like a standard average of how long models work for?
I should know that. I don't. I will say that usually once you start getting older, there becomes less room for you, because it is all about, I mean, talk about talk about going from, growing up in Krishna consciousness to, hey, you're your body.
Right.
Like you can't get more opposite. Yeah. And I didn't think about that till later. And I was like, geez, the opposite of everything I've ever been taught is what I put myself in the middle of.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, once you start getting older, they start, being like, you're getting a little old for this, as nicely as possible.
Right. Trying to frame the discussion here so that we can really get the most out of it. How did you come to terms with this idea of you're growing up, we're not the body, and then you're in a career that's completely focused on that? Tell us a little bit more about the details of that experience. Did you come to terms with, this is my job, and at the same time, did you have any negative experiences with people telling you need to look like this and things like that?
Yeah. That's a lot to cover. I did have those experiences of, I was young, so a lot of that I did. I mean, it's always hard to think I'm not this body. We struggle with that all the time. But when I was younger, it was definitely easy to slip into that frame of mind. Oh, well, I get paid for this. People judge me on how I look.
Right.
And so you almost don't even think twice about it. You are, for that industry, you are your body.
Right.
That's your job, is that you're your body. And yeah, I did have, you need to lose a little bit of weight. To Ford's credit, in the beginning, I actually went in with an eating disorder. So stuff started early. To their credit, they pulled me aside twice, and they're like, you look a little sick. You need to gain some weight. And that was actually, I was like, whoa, I didn't know that they do that. But, it is because clients are like, she looks like she's about to keel over. Let's not work with her. So, but I've been all over, like during the 12 to 15 years, whatever the run was, it's, I've gone through the ups and the downs and the weight gains and the weight losses and the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you go from Miami, and what did the modeling journey look like as far as your progression inside the industry, and how much travel was involved? And give us a little bit more of an insight, zooming out and looking back at your career. What are all the big parts of it for someone who doesn't know anything about it?
Sure. Well, in Miami, I did pretty well in the beginning. And then I feel like the fits and starts coincided with me being like smoking cigarettes for the first time and then getting into drinking slowly because I didn't have any devotee association there. It was all models.
Right.
They have what they call club promoters that get paid to bring out groups of beautiful girls, and in return, all the girls drink for free and get into these clubs ahead of the line, and you feel special. And oh my God, it's so silly, but when you're young and impressionable, you're like, wow, this is what celebrities get to do. And so you get sucked in really easily. And so to my credit, I think I spent the first year there, no cigarettes and no alcohol. I think definitely no alcohol. And then, I started dabbling with that association. And I started dabbling, and I heard this so much growing up, association is so important, good association is so important. Didn't realize it till later when I looked back, and I was like, oh man, it coincided with the people that I was spending time with. I was my association.
Right. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Give us a little bit more about, okay, so models party, they get in for free. They get drinks for free.
It sounds great. On paper, it sounds good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you paid for it somehow, I'm sure. And we'll probably get into that, but just a little bit more about the career itself. What's it like to, what's the 9 to 5 like of a model? You have a portfolio, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How much traveling is involved and all that?
Sure. So it looks a little bit different for everybody. Some people do better. Some people stick mainly to one city and just really work the market there. In the beginning, we do test shoots, which is basically you're getting your book started because you're new. You don't have any pictures. So you do a couple of test shoots, and those can cost quite a bit of money. But it also, if you have a good agency, it goes kind of on your tab, that they take that money out of your jobs that you get later. So you get a couple, 2 test shoots, and then you start going on casting calls. A lot of times, those casting calls are really swamped with people, unless you have a request casting call. And that's just you and a couple other people they want to see. But for general casting calls, we call them cattle calls, because there's just like a whole bunch of people, and you wait in line, and you wait, and you sit, and and then if you book a job, that's great. Some clients are great to work with, and they're super easy, and you get along with them, and you have a great day. And then some can be really hard, and maybe a little more cold, or just you feel a little more like a thing than a person.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, for the most part, I worked with really nice people. I worked with really nice people. I got lucky.
Yeah. And what are some of the, I guess, product lines that you shot for it? Was it, department stores, or, what's the variety of projects that you worked on?
Sure. I worked for department stores. I did JCPenney and Belk's, and I did a Walmart Christmas shoot at some point. What are some other ones I did? Wow, of course, now I'm blanking.
Mostly clothing, I guess, is the majority, would you say?
Yeah, mostly clothing. When I first started, I did some runway. But runway, even though that seems like the most glamorous, it doesn't pay very much. It's more like the same thing with being in magazines, like high fashion magazines. Like a Vogue might pay nothing, but you're like, oh, I got a picture in Vogue. It's more, they can do that because people want it so bad.
Right, yeah.
But commercial work, that's where you smile a lot, where you're shooting for department stores or catalogs. That's where the money is.
Okay.
They want to see that smile, and the people can relate to her when they look at her picture.
Right.
That kind of stuff. Yeah. So, but I did a bunch of it, mostly commercial work, which I'm really lucky for, actually.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about what that looks like from the inside.
Yeah, I would like to say real quick that the industry itself, if you treat it as a business, it can be really great. The problem is there's a lot of this stuff waiting on the outside that's really enticing, like the clubbing, and everybody wants the pretty people, the models out. The business itself is a business. It's everything that's on the outskirts that's a little more evil.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Would you recommend this career to a younger person like you?
No.
Nope.
No. Especially, I feel like if someone is pretty intelligent, they wouldn't get very much satisfaction out of it. A lot of my time spent doing it, the paychecks were great, but a lot of it was like, oh my God, this is really shallow. A lot of small talk about nothing. And it's very draining doing that.
Yeah. All right. So second snapshot at your Krishna consciousness. You're in the middle of your modeling career. And what was your experience of KC at that time?
Oh man, I just kind of, I can say I went off the deep end for a bit. I did. I went
I mean internally. I'm not talking what's your practice like. Yeah,
sure.
Just internally. How did you live your Krishna consciousness internally at that time? Because I was in college and I was in the middle of a dance club and I'm just chanting Hare Krishna thinking, what am I doing here? So
I had those moments.
Yeah.
I had those moments later. I think when my Krishna consciousness that was very dormant was just kind of like waiting to reappear. But I wasn't too active about it until later, when I was in real distress. And that's when, a lot of times that's when people turn to Krishna. Right. You're like, I can't take this anymore. Krishna, I need help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
did you ever have like, even just like a little check-in, even if it's dormant, were there moments where you might speak to, Krishna and say, hey, remember me, or something like that?
Yeah, there were some prayers. There were some prayers there. There was, and my parents, if you have good parents, you have some hope. And I have good parents. So they would, they were my reminder of Krishna. And it was really nice. It was kind of like whenever I'd go visit them, no matter how deep into my, addictions I was or whatever I was into, I would see the deities at their house and be like, oh yeah. And these nice memories would come back. And and if a friend reached out on Facebook, I'd be like, oh man, I remember the memories I had at the temple with that person. And they were all good. Those were all the happy things that I remembered. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's really insightful, to hear the different part of that journey. So, all right, tell us a little bit about, what might have eventually driven you to start thinking, okay, I gotta move back, or I want to come back to Krishna consciousness. How did that develop? Was it based on your career reaching its length, based on your age, or were there experiences that were, kind of the springboard for that?
Oh yeah. I straight up figured out pretty quick that I was an alcoholic. Once I started drinking, I was like off to the races. And I figured that out, or I that type of alcohol, like there are two types, I feel, and that one, you start drinking and you can't stop from the beginning of your drinking career. And then there's the one who gradually builds up to being that kind of drinker. Okay. Mine was pretty immediate.
Yeah.
I didn't know at the beginning I was an alcoholic, but I was from the very beginning. It wasn't a buildup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that continued, and I got into other, alcohol is the gateway drug. I don't care what anybody says. It's really like everything goes along after that. You make bad decisions,
Right.
Drinking. So that threw a wrench into everything. I was trying to balance that. But then, and in the beginning, I could balance it, but not for long. I was like, 4 hours of sleep after going out last night, I'm fine. I'll go do this photo shoot. But it quickly deteriorated that way. And I was not able to keep it up. I would start blowing off casting calls in my agency. And by then I was in Chicago, actually. My agency would be like, you didn't show up. And I'm like, oh boy. Yep. I didn't want to stop doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I started really shooting myself in the foot, and almost, and not realizing that I wasn't in control of it. I kept thinking, I made the decision to keep having fun with my friends and drinking. And no, it was, once I took that first one, I wasn't in control anymore of that.
Yeah.
And so things started going downhill that way. Surprisingly, I was able to keep my career going. I'm pretty amazed about that. I did get dropped by a modeling agency, and then because of that, and then I signed with another one. And so that was like, fast forward maybe about 10 years between. So Miami, New York for a little bit, Miami, New York, Chicago. Chicago's where I kind of spent the most time.
Right. So what are your responsibilities to an agency that they would drop you?
So they give me a couple of, they give me 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. Like, I got a couple of those and made excuse. You lie and you make excuses of why you couldn't go. Oh, I'm not feeling well, whatever it is, or my dog this, my car that. Those are clear signs of somebody who probably has a problem. And they were just like, you know what? They weren't nice about it either. They were like, oh, I'm so sorry, sweetie, we have to let you go. You're just not keeping on. I got an earful, which, looking back, was probably pretty fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I'm really glad that happened.
Yeah. How did you process that, getting dropped? What did it mean for you? And,
I think that was the beginning of when I started thinking, maybe something's wrong here. I wish I would have been a little smarter and realized it before that, but that was a good message for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It got the ball rolling. I didn't quit then, but it got the ball rolling for me to be like, well, if I would have just, done things right, like, why couldn't I just do things right? And I would have still been with them. So it was good. It was good for me.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing so honestly. I really appreciate it. So what was the next milestone in your I don't know, recovery or whatever you want to call it?
Well, there was someone, I saw somebody out. I made a friend, when you're drinking and you're going out to these places and everybody because you've been living there for a while, and the bouncers and the owners, and so you end up hanging out with the same people that are doing the same things as you are, because you naturally gravitate towards each other.
Right.
And so I made this one friend, and I would get in trouble with him all the time, like, alcohol and other things. And then I would go through and then I started trying to, here and there, I'm going to not drink for a week. and then I started realizing how much willpower I did not have and how much control I did not have over alcohol.
Yeah.
And then one day I ran into this person, I would say maybe a year later, where I was out again, and he's a nightlife photographer. So he takes pictures for these clubs and they get to post how much people are having fun out while they're out. And he was like, he was like, hey, just, I'm sober. And I was like, what? Because the last time I saw you.
What's that?
Well, yeah, exactly. People do that. And that planted the seed. And so I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. And then a couple weeks later, I think I went through like another binge phase at some point. It was just getting so miserable. I mean, it had been miserable for a while, but it was really starting to get to the bottom.
Right.
And I think what happened, and I'll never know because I didn't go to a hospital or anything, but I think I detoxed on my own for like 3 days. And it was kind of like being in hell.
Wow.
And
but you did that on your own purposely.
On my own, yeah. I mean, I couldn't really move. So it was purposefully, but it was also, I didn't really have a choice. I was just like, I can't function. And it was for 3 days that I was in and out of sleep and just like sweating excessively. And looking back, I was afterwards, I was like, that had to have been a detox.
Wow.
That was probably pretty dangerous to do by myself.
Yeah.
And I remembered that this friend of mine, Tyler, he was sober. And I texted him and I'm like, Tyler, I think I just detoxed on my own. And it was really, really horrible. And he's like, you know what? I go to these meetings, right? I think you should maybe come check one out with me sometime. You might like it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of when the clouds started parting a little bit. And there was like a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I had no idea before that there were recovery meetings. I had no idea. Because that's something I never had to deal with. I mean, growing up as a devotee, it just didn't even drink. Like drinking didn't even cross my mind. Yeah. So, and I'm like, really? That they have? I was so naive to that.
Right.
And
so we learn as we grow up and go through life.
Oh my God! And looking back, you're like, why didn't I know that when I was, when I really needed it or when I was younger? But everything happens the way it does. For a reason.
Yeah, so I'm sure that was a really helpful association to be in a group like that.
Yeah, that's association is everything again.
Yeah, and especially when it's with people who are going through the same struggles or who can relate to what you're dealing with. That goes a long way.
Yeah, when you're in a room full of people that are trying to be better, that is pretty amazing. Yeah. Because up till then, I was around people that were trying to be their worst, basically.
Right.
And got swept up in that. But this was a whole new eye-opening experience for me. And it was so like I would get goosebumps in those meetings. Like, wow, it's like inspired. And also hearing all these stories that were just way worse than mine, like in and out of the hospital 20 times.
You feel so bad about yourself after that.
Yeah, but all the same suffering there. Like everybody's suffering. Right. It didn't matter, what experience you had. Everyone was just trying to get out of it, trying to get out of that suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful that in recovery groups, you're really hanging out with people who are, in a way, the highest people you'd want to hang out with because they're really trying to become better and they're doing something very tangible about it. And that the synergy that comes from hanging out with others who are doing the same thing is very powerful.
Yeah. And a lot of the books that we would read from, is God-centered or higher power.
Right.
So I would just be like, oh, Krishna.
Totally.
And they tell you, it's even if you're not super spiritual, whoever you feel like your higher power is, could be, to make it whoever you want, but it's something higher than you are, because very clearly you are not in control. I was like, wow, that is true. We can't control this.
Do you think as a society we should have our own recovery groups, or are they just as fine as they are mentioning God as a higher power, or do you think there is a benefit to doing something like that with all devotees who are going through the same thing and who really see that higher power as Krishna?
I am so glad that you asked me that. I don't know if it has to be just devotees. There is something nice about maybe talking to somebody who doesn't know you. You feel a little more free to really dive down about experiences that might be really uncomfortable. Like, you wouldn't necessarily want your therapist to be your next door neighbor, your Hare Krishna next door neighbor.
Right.
But I do think that a lot more devotees than we realize struggle with this kind of stuff.
Of course.
And and I think I feel like because it's it's against one of the 4 regulated principles, they may not feel so comfortable talking about it because there is a certain amount of judgment. They're like, oh well, maybe they're not as good of a devotee as we thought, or they might feel like, oh, I'm not as good of a devotee as people think I am, but I can't tell people this. And I think we need to get over that, because
that's a problem.
It's a problem, and this stuff affects anybody. That you can be the most religious person, you can be the most atheistic person, you can be poor, you can be rich. Like, this addictive personality, it's scientists still don't know exactly how it comes about. We know that it seems like it's a bit genetic, but like, we all have alcoholics in our family. Like, it's not
and most devotees joined because they were hippies.
And who knows what's in our what our ancestors dealt with, like. And we just, some of us find out that we have this issue that we can't really deal with that well, and it's not our fault.
Right.
But it's something that people should feel comfortable asking for help about, and knowing that it's not their fault.
I totally agree. Some people have just an addictive nature. I feel like I'm like that, and but I really, to me, it's a big deal that I hope, as the next generations of devotees come about, and we keep making Krishna consciousness and ISKCON better throughout the years, that we can break down this. I think it's just unintentional that somehow we've gotten into a place where it's just so hard to be honest about where we're at. And I bet if we started a 12-step program here in Alachua, there would be so many devotees coming out of the woodworks and who would love to be able to just connect and open honestly. Yes, this is where I'm at. I'm so glad. I know you're right there as well.
Well, maybe that's the service I'm supposed to do. I'm really glad that you said that, because I would be like, hey, I'm going to this meeting at this time. If any devotees want to join me, let's go. Let's work on it.
It's been on my mind for a while, and there's a lot of organization that needs to be put into it. How do we maintain, like you were saying, confidentiality and all these things? But I would love to see this happen in our community for all the different 12 steps. You got alcoholics, narcotics, sexaholics. There's so many issues that we know there's a lot of us dealing with. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and opening up this topic. And I hope our listeners will relate, and maybe that's something that we can start working on eventually for our community. This is the largest Hare Krishna community in North America. We have so many areas that we can just be pioneers in, and I think this one would be a great one too.
And who knows, it could it saves lives and it saves sanity, and it saved my life.
Yeah.
Well, Krishna consciousness saved my life, but this brought me back to it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So maybe tell us a little bit about the return and, what was it like to come back to this community? To maybe tell us a little bit more about how that happened, that you came back. Also, I met your husband, Doug, who's absolutely lovely, and that you met him while you were out on your career. So tell us a little bit about let's talk about Doug a little bit. And by the way, I'm trying to get him on the show. I think he would have a wonderful story to share with us as well. But yeah, you two are married, and
6 years just passed.
6 years. That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about how you met and eventually how you decided to move back to Alachua.
Sure. So in Chicago, after I got sober and stayed sober, I had a week where I tried to stay sober and then went out and was like, I can handle this, and relapsed. And then after that, I stayed sober.
Okay.
And it's been 9 years just passed. So I've been sober for 9 years.
That is amazing.
Literally one day at a time. That's it, and it will be like that for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I have really good association now, so that helps. So I met Doug.
Do you continue those meetings with the recovery group, or is that something that you don't need to do anymore?
No, that's I would say that's something that should always be done. I've been kind of lax about it since COVID and everything.
Right.
I'm sure though that there are Zoom meetings that you can do, which is actually really cool. I haven't done any, but I'm guessing you don't have to have your face there. You know what I mean? Like, I bet you could really anonymous, if anyone hears this and is curious about it, I'm sure you can find a Zoom meeting online that you can listen in on without showing your face, or people don't have to know it's you. So
that's great.
But I will start going back probably pretty soon, now that things are clearing up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So you were in Chicago.
So I was in Chicago. By then I had a little boutique in the Ukrainian Village area. And I think I was sober for about a year, or a little more than a year. And I was like, man, it is really hard to meet people if you don't want to meet them at bars or clubs, or, you're in a big city, but it can feel super lonely. And it's like, where do you meet someone nice?
Right.
It's just hard in general. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't around, there's a nice temple there, but not really many people my age or a little bit older. So I actually went on Match.com. I was like, people pay for this, so there might be someone who's a little more serious on here, and let's just see what happens. So I was busy with my boutique. And
this is clothing, like your own clothing line, or what was that all about?
So I was the one that was always in the store. I had my mom shopping for it while she was overseas. So we get really cool stuff in from like Nepal and Thailand, and like really colorful, scarves and hats and rugs and kind of a little bit of everything. Whatever we thought was interesting, we're like, let's put it in there.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
It was a lot of fun. But it did get lonely because I was the only one in there all the time. And I'm like, ugh. Right. I had friends that would stop in every now and then. But so I signed up on Match, and I'm like, let's see what happens. A lot of weirdos out there. There's so many.
I've never used it. All right, fill me in. How do you set up the criteria? Is it one of those swipe left, swipe right? I know nothing
No, no,
about.
no, 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 no. No Tinder. No Tinder
Not
here.
that. Okay.
That's more of a, I feel like that's more of a hookup thing, because you can see who's in your area, like
I see. Okay.
a radius, which is really creepy, honestly, Tinder. And yeah, and yes, no, and come on, that's just based on looks. Let's be honest. The swipe left, swipe right.
Right. Okay. So Match.com, there's like a profile and.
Yeah, you fill out questions, and what it does is it tries to match you with other people. So
I see.
I was a vegetarian then.
Mhm.
And vegan now. I don't eat meat now, but as a vegetarian,
that now I'm back to eating meat.
No, I had to make that clear because that sounded weird. As a vegetarian, still a vegetarian then, and so it will try to find other people who are vegetarian. Or I don't drink, so
Right.
try to match me with other people. So you fill out this questionnaire, and I think it's actually kind of brilliant, because you want to meet like-minded people. Like-minded people is what's probably going to last a lot longer than, oh man, I have to, I had been there with the boyfriends who ate meat, and it's a disaster. It didn't go well. So match, and a lot of terrible responses, which I've just ignored. And then
so even though there was the criteria, what made them bad responses? If they still met the criteria, I guess, right?
Well, we would probably get matched. And my personal criteria was, if you cannot write English properly or use proper grammar, I don't want to talk to you. Because, hey, what up? No grammar, right. Everything's spelled wrong,
right.
No capitalization. And where's that going to go? Let's be honest. What up? Right. What up, girl? No. But then here we have my lovely future husband, who's working at the University of Chicago in astrophysics. He has his PhD in astrophysics. So I'm like, okay, well, he's definitely got brains, probably a little nerdy. That's cool. I can deal with that.
Right.
But he can write type out he's a good writer. And I was like, okay, well, I'll meet up with him, and I met up with him in a little coffee place that was in a grocery store near the store, and and it was pretty cool. It worked out. It did. It took. I was very, from all the previous stuff that I'd been through, I was very hesitant with him. Mm-hmm. But he kept me company in the boutique, and since he was a research scientist, he could do a lot of his work nearby at a coffee shop, or sometimes even in the boutique. Mm-hmm. And so I actually really got to know him as a friend before it progressed to more than that. And I think that was accidentally really good. Yeah. Like, I wasn't thinking of it that way, but it happened that way. And I was like, man, he has a lot of he has a lot of devotional qualities.
Yeah.
A lot.
And he's now working with the BI, and I'm going to leave it at that, because that's another episode. But
yes, he can tell you all the secrets of the BI.
Yeah, but thanks for sharing how you guys met. That's really cool. So eventually, you tell us a little bit more about whether it's the return to Alachua or the return to Krishna consciousness. But how did that all manifest?
So Doug and I were in Los Angeles, and then we were in Chicago together for a while, and then we went to Los Angeles for 2 years, and I was doing acting work over there, less modeling by then, just by choice, because there's kind of a little, empty, of course, always empty, but I was just getting a little bored with that, and acting was much more interesting and challenging and hard. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of fun. Something that you actually have to learn to do, not just look a certain way.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, and then kind of COVID happened, and we were like, first of all, he's not a city person. He's not a city person. He likes nature.
Mhm.
And by then I was getting a little tired of the cities because I'd been in them for quite a while. And they, I still, I love this. I love New York. I would always love to go there, but living, maybe not so much anymore, now that I'm a little older.
Right.
And COVID hit, and we had been talking about Alachua by then. And that was kind of our sign to move back.
Okay.
And my parents were just building a house, and they were like, come stay with us, even if or come stay with us and see if you like it here. And so that was kind of okay, well, there were a couple of silver linings with COVID for us. And that was one of them. The other one was that we started listening to Jayadvaita Maharaj. All of a sudden Zoom blew up because nobody could see each other in person.
Right.
But we were able to get devotee association through Zoom from being on lockdown in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
3 times a week.
Nice.
Four times a week. So that was a game changer too.
Was that kind of your comeback? I feel like your comeback to Krishna consciousness started a little bit before that, perhaps.
Oh yeah, it started before that. Definitely. When I quit drinking, I started having a lot of realizations. Looking back,
so it kind of came along with that.
Yeah, I have a clear mind. I mean, my mind wasn't clear for quite a while before that. You can't. You can't think about things in a clear way.
Right. So tell us a little bit about what were those realizations? What were the first steps to kind of rekindling your spirituality?
Okay. Well, first one was, because I had gone out there and experienced material life, and so I went, wow, those Hare Krishnas were pretty right. They were kind of all that stuff that I learned. It makes so much more sense now. Right. Now that I've experienced
you've heard so many times over and over growing up.
Yeah, well, then I experienced them, and we hear that there are different levels of intelligence, and mine is on the lower end, where apparently I have to experience stuff for it to make sense to me. And I did experience it, and I'm really grateful that I experienced it, because I looked at Krishna consciousness in a whole new light after that. Yeah, I was.
So that was so you could understand kind of your lessons from childhood, how they made so much more sense coming at it from experience. What else might have happened between that and listening to Jayadvaita Swami 3 times a week?
Well,
what was the span, would you say, from when
how many years, or?
Well, from when you became sober until COVID, for example, how long was that?
Sober to COVID was. I have my sobriety day on my arm. So
nice. Well, you said it was 9 years, so
8 years. Yeah. 8 years.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a slow progression. Mm-hmm. Sure. I think getting into a relationship makes you start thinking more about that as well, because you're like, I got married to this person, if we have a kid, I really like for him or her to grow up around devotees, because you kind of start, luckily Doug was a vegetarian, then we both went vegan together, so that will we raise our kid as a vegan, or you start thinking about your future, you can't not think about it that way.
Right.
And also, I think probably one of the biggest things is telling Doug about Krishna consciousness, because he didn't know about it before he met me. Right. He hadn't even heard of us right. Before he met me. And yeah, and luckily his first real introduction to other devotees were my parents. And
Okay.
my father, Panchatattva.
They are both probably the number one devotees I'd want to meet if it was the first time.
Exactly. First of
So
all, my mom.
lovely and
Yeah, you will go to the spiritual world if you eat my mom's cooking. And then my dad is just really good at explaining.
Really, they are both so loving, and they're like torchlights, your parents.
Yeah, they're very
really sweet.
When we had bhajans in Alachua when I was younger, everyone used to, all my friends used to come over to hang out with my dad. Like, because, he's so much fun to be around, play around on the harmonium and be like, did you hear this tune? And, he was like one of them. So, yeah.
I'll always remember I was at the Atlanta temple because I was based there with my job. And him and Siki Mahidi, they came in the temple room, and there's something about devotees. They can say the most simple, funny thing or a simple joke, and I will just die laughing to tears. And I had that experience with your dad and Siki Mahidi. I can't remember what it was, but it was so simple, but it was so pure that I just had the best laugh. And that's something I've experienced with the, true devotees. They can just bring out laughter out of something so simple. It doesn't have to be some raunchy joke, and we can just have so much fun with it.
Yeah, he's got a lot of dad jokes, but I hope he doesn't share those with other people.
It was probably a dad joke.
Just like, oh my God. But it does, it does say something like we've been, Doug and I have been staying, we're at my parents right now. We've been staying here for a year. It wasn't planned that way. We didn't think we'd be staying with them for that long. But they're so great that it's easy to live with them. They're happy to have us here, and we're happy to be around them. And it's a noisy household, and we have a lot of fun. Right. And Doug is just like, who are these crazy people? But, Krishna consciousness is fun. Devotees are fun.
Yeah. No, and it's nice that, I can understand how that would have come out for you even more as you met Doug, and he's not a devotee. And obviously you're going to share with him this super massive part of your life.
And he's asking me questions where I'm like, I need to start reading again. Right. I want to give him the right answers. And so actually sometimes we'd call my dad up and put him on speaker and be like, what does the Bhagavad Gita say about blah, blah, blah again? And, so it was a slow introduction and a rekindling for me, which was really nice. Well, Krishna consciousness makes the most sense to me. So, I'm going to share it with Doug, who's asking me all these questions.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What would you say is one of the most prominent realizations for you in as far as Krishna consciousness, when you look at the journey you've been through with, traveling and going through this career and kind of coming back to Krishna consciousness? What's one of the most potent realizations that you've had?
Many, but many. I would say one of the most important ones is, and I only really understood this about a year ago. And we were still about a year and a half ago, we were still in Los Angeles, right before we moved to Alachua. And it was during a class with Jayadvaita Maharaj, a Zoom class. And something I don't want to quote Maharaj because I don't know his exact words, but it was something along the lines of how devotees are their own people. We don't all have to, I think growing up, I always thought to be a pure devotee, it looks like this. And it was a very clear picture of what this pure devotee looked like, and just always very humble and chanting all the time and dressed a certain way and wearing tilak 24/7 probably in my head. Never swears. Just perfect. Right. In my Krishna consciously perfect. Yeah. And so when Maharaj was giving this class, he was saying how we're all different. We each have our different talents that we can use in Krishna's service. And it just kind of struck me that I'm like, wow, I can actually be a good devotee and not look like that figure that I had in my head.
Yeah.
And it took me 35 years to realize that. And I was like, my mind is blown. When you get those really simple realizations, but they just like blow your mind and you don't look at it the same again. That was one of those moments.
Yeah, that is such a important realization. I got to admit, I've kind of went through a similar path with that, where I, just like you said, I had this image of the perfect devotee, and it also took me a really long time to understand that. And one way that I've understood it is just spending time with senior devotees and seeing that when you get to know them a little bit more personally outside of the temple room, you realize that they're human as well,
Oh, yeah.
and they still are. In most cases, they can be pure devotees, but it's just like you said, it doesn't have to look a certain way, and it's just by getting to know them that you can see their devotion, and that can be manifest and expressed in so many ways. For me, Shankar Prabhu, who just passed away, was such a great example of that. He was such a character, but everyone will say that he was a very, very advanced devotee.
Yeah, I've been hearing that. I unfortunately did not have his association, but I've been hearing a lot of stories, pretty amazing stories about between him and Srila Prabhupada, and I'm like, wow, what a lucky person.
Yeah. No, that's a great realization. Thank you for sharing that.
I have more.
Yeah, I was gonna say, tell me more. I just want to hear, kind of this along the same theme of what are some, looking back on your life and where you're at now. Tell us about what your Krishna consciousness looks like today, now that you're back in Alachua, and how do you practice?
Oh my goodness. Well, I try to, with that in mind, with that, Krishna consciousness looks different to me now than it did when I was younger. I think at some point we actually, so our parents, they joined the Hare Krishna movement. They made the decision to join the Hare Krishna movement. And I think we do that as well at some point. And I think within the last few years, I was like, you know what, I'm going to join the Hare Krishna movement. Even though I've grown up in it, it's like, it's an actual decision that you make. Sure. Like, I want to be more spiritual. I want to start chanting rounds. I want to, get good association. I want, and I think a lot of that comes getting older, being like, you know what, I really could die at any moment. That's another thing that you hear all the time growing up. Right. And you don't really think about it until you start seeing people pass away. COVID was a big catalyst for a lot of people to start thinking about that, about their mortality. And you're like, I don't really have much time to waste. I'm assuming, Krishna willing, that I'll go have a natural death at some point, but I don't know that. Right. And I don't want to waste time. And I don't want to waste time with bad association. Like, I don't want to be criticizing devotees, be around people who are criticizing devotees. Mm-hmm. I want to feel uplifted, and I want to uplift other people. So it's kind of like figuring out what I really want to do with my time now. And so that involves, chanting. I don't chant 16 rounds every day, but trying to chant regularly. Right. And these Zoom classes, I still attend Zoom classes, which I do to Maharaj about 4 times a week. And it's okay to be a little picky about who you spend your time with. We're in a huge community. Mm-hmm. You can be like, oh, these are wonderful devotees at our age. I want to hang out with them because they make me excited about Krishna consciousness. And that's what I want to do. We just had Mitra Sane, mm-hmm. Prabhu, who's moving here from North Carolina. And
Oh,
he
is he?
just,
Nice.
great
The
addition to the
musician,
mix.
right?
Yeah. The musician Mahar is his wife.
Nice.
Yeah, they're in Jacksonville right now, but they've basically moved. They're just settling and finding their place and stuff. We just had him for a few days, and I was just like, man, I am so inspired.
Yeah.
Like he's so inspired that I started getting really inspired. And it's just, it's that I love being around that. That's happy. That's happiness. Krishna consciousness is happiness.
Yeah.
And we can have that with the right association. So that's, I've been getting all kinds of realizations like that recently. And also actually something very similar that I learned, we are devotees trying to better ourselves. And I was introduced to that in those recovery rooms. Those are people trying to better themselves.
Right.
And a saying that they have that I think is exactly the same for being, a good, decent person, a good, decent devotee is do the next right thing. So it's like, you think about something every day, you have these little things every day that you can deal with as a Hare Krishna devotee. And it's like, whatever it is, do the right thing, do what a good devotee would do.
Yeah.
So it applies to those little things in our everyday life as well, not just 16 rounds and just that idea that we had in our head of the pure devotee.
Yeah. I love how you said chant regularly. It's so much more accessible than a massive 16 rounds where you can so easily fall into the mechanical and just chanting a number rather than
60.
Yeah, that's so intimidating. And then that's all you think about is like, I got to get through this number. So I really like how you worded that, chanting regularly, that's the principle, and how you're exemplifying the quality of devotee association and finding the right association and how much
important.
That can be the best life experience, just hanging out with the right devotees.
Yeah, it will change your life. It really will. It changes everything that goes along with it. It changes the way you look at your rounds, the way the way you want to start going to the temple again. Just all that. That's all through association. Yeah. And in the same way with that can all be taken away from you. All that inspiration with the wrong people. So. Yeah, that's
great.
There's a lot to look forward to in Krishna consciousness. It's pretty exciting. Yeah.
What about the Alachua community? Now that you're back, what are some of your observations having come back? And, how can we make that better as well? I mean, it's an amazing community. We have nothing to complain, but I'm always curious, how can we make it even better? Like starting a particular project or whatever.
Yeah, well, what you mentioned before, maybe, mental health issues, that would be great. There's a lot of inside stuff that we can do just for our community. But I think what the things that are really needed and really important is sharing all this one. Like I was talking to one of the people that has to do with the festival, the Holy Names coming up. And I'm like, this is amazing. I love that the youth, the second generation, we're not exactly youth anymore, the second generation are putting this on, and it's so inspiring and everything. We need to share that with people who aren't devotees. Like, that's for us. That is for us. But we have to start.
I agree. That's such a good point. Every time the Festival of the Holy Name comes around, I'm always thinking, who can I bring? I got to share this with someone. So yeah, you're saying some kind of platform to help promote it outside of the community. Is that what you mean?
Well, I asked him, what about putting flyers around UF? Like, there are so many young people who are open-minded and right now is a really good time where people are extremely open-minded and into compassion and into veganism more than ever, and vegetarianism, and be kind to each other. But the the feeling that I got was that the Festival of the Holy Names is really just for the devotees. And that's fine. We have things just for devotees, but we have to create things that are for other people as well. And I think that's happening with the Krishna House,
Right.
Which I need to start helping out over there, because I think it's so, in my head, I'm like, imagine if devotees didn't go out and my dad didn't run into them.
Right.
I wouldn't be here.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. You want to take it?
No, it's my dad, and he's probably in the other room. So
put him on.
Put him on speaker.
Oh, we're just talking about you, Prabhu.
We're saying all the nice things. But yeah, there's Krishna House, and there's distributing prasadam at UF, and I think I heard Santa Fe too. I'm not sure, but
yeah, they do Krishna lunch at Santa Fe.
That stuff is important, and it sticks with people, and that's how you make devotees. We're getting older. What happens when it's just our kid? Like, we can't let this up. We've got our Prabhupada disciples kind of going one by one now. Yeah. Like, we have to start thinking about the future. Right. And also, if we enjoy this Krishna consciousness so much, why wouldn't we want to share it with other people?
Right.
It doesn't, you have to share it.
I love where your heart is at. And I'm all about it. I hope we can get to that next step. I think for a long time, we've been trying to maintain what was established by the first generation devotees. And then it was putting out fires and, trying to mend, mistakes and that kind of thing.
Learning curve.
And I think we are doing a pretty good job in this community with, our own nurturing with different festivals and all that. But I agree. I think it would be great to find some really innovative ways to start sharing what we have and, Prabhupada's mission.
One more thought on that too. I think it's really important for us to do it. Young people will be attracted to the energy of other young people.
Yeah.
It's not so, and that's what our parents experienced. They joined when they were 18, 20, and it was because other devotees were 18, 20, and they're like, oh yeah, and just the energy. We can't, we have wonderful book distributors and preachers right now that are a little older, and that's great. They're the ones that are really upholding what Srila Prabhupada wanted right now. But if we got a group of young people doing this, I can only imagine that young non-devotees out there would be like, whoa, what are these guys doing? That looks like fun.
I agree. And there's so many avenues to do that. It's really unlimited. We just have to tap in and be ready to do it. Yeah. If you were to meet someone who might be interested, what would your pitch be?
What would my pitch be? Oh man, you gotta try
based on your life experience. What was that?
My obviously default prasadam. You gotta the music and the food. Oh, you gotta try it. Yeah. We've got cows, and we've got an eco village. I think what Mother Kuti is doing is amazing. Mm-hmm. That right now, that's such a big thing. Yeah. And I think it's just more, how do we let more people know about these things?
Right.
It's there. We just have to find a way to bring people to it. Yeah. So, but yeah, I would say, Sunday, free food on Sundays, and that's pretty good. It's so funny. Mitra Prabhu was telling us a story about a book distributor. I think it was Adikarta Prabhu. He was the way that he would approach people with a book is say, hey, you look pretty intelligent. Why don't you check this book out?
Nice.
And I was like, I wonder if, just like my mind started going like,
simple as
hey,
that.
you look pretty intelligent. You got to try this food. Right. But, just kind of I don't know if I could he has a British accent and he's really charming. So that's his thing. But yeah, just kind of lighthearted and happy. People are attracted to the fact that devotees are so bright and happy.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what it is. My dad says, he's like, well, what are they so happy about? I got to find out. So.
Yeah, I forget who it was, but not too long ago, I was hearing how important it is to arrange our life in a way that we can practice Krishna consciousness happily. The chant, that's what it was. It was chant and be happy. I think it was maybe Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. How chant and be happy can mean two things. It means chant and you'll become happy, or chant and do what you got to do to be happy. And that definitely goes a long way to help.
Yeah, you can actually have both of those.
Right.
You can chant, be happy, and you can chant and also do everything else to be happy in Krishna consciousness. Yeah, exactly. That's pretty great. I like that.
Yeah, no, it's a good approach to how mental health is super important. We got to take care of ourselves. So.
Yeah.
Shara, thank you so much. This was really a great discussion, and I'm so happy that you accepted to come on the show and get insights into not only your career, but your personal journey. Thank you so much for sharing such details about your experience. I think it really goes a long way, and you're setting a really beautiful example of what I think we should all be able to do in sharing our personal journeys and inspire each other by just being honest and staying motivated in our Krishna consciousness. Are there any parting words you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, it's always a work in progress, and one day at a time.
Absolutely. I like that.
And if anybody wants to talk to me about anything, they can feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, great. We'll put I guess you're on Facebook, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, and they can reach out to you or.
Sounds good. All right, Saranagati, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Nama. Thank you for asking me to be here. It's a big honor.
Our pleasure. Haribol.
Haribol.